In Titus 2, older women are commanded to teach what is good so they can help younger women love their husbands and children. On today's show, you'll hear from older women who will share timeless, relevant biblical wisdom and personal, profound life experiences to help answer your questions and teach what God says is good so you can be the wife and mother you were created to be. Welcome to another episode of Older Women Likewise.
Good evening. We are so glad to have you with us this evening. And I am so delighted to introduce to some of you and others of you who've been long-term viewers and listeners of our program will know Jensen. Nicholson is the married name, right?
Yes, that's right.
Mixed up. Okay. So I've seen you both ways. So, But Jensen had done some programs with us. Oh, it's been a couple of years now, I think. When you had written a book, when you and Adam first married, it was a wonderful book that she had written, and she shared that with us on the screen. And we were so glad to be able to write about and talk about that book. I'm sorry. And it just was a marvelous book. I think, in fact, my copy, I passed it along to someone that I thought was looking to marry, that I thought would be benefited from it. So, and I'm sure others have been as well. But now Jensen has written another book, and the name of it is the name of the program, Hope for a Houseful. Jensen, tell us something about this book.
So this book, a lot of people don't know this, but I started writing it pretty much right after the other one came out. It's all about our journey of infertility and miscarriage and all the ups and downs. And as you can see in my picture here, we do have a little boy, so we have an extremely happy ending to our story. But I wrote on it for a long time. I just would write, kind of like journal, just things that would happen. And obviously I'm so glad I did. I never imagined that I would share all of this because I'm just a very private person, but that's just how it worked out. And I'm glad that it did.
Quite often through the book, you talk about God leading you, and you could see God's hand, and you could tell, that was one of the comments that you made was, I remember reading that you just can't imagine how anybody could go through a trial like this without God. And I think that, that's something that Christians feel on a regular basis, is that God's with you. And I can see God's hand in your writing this, not only for your own journaling, for your own comfort and sanity, if you will, but also to help others as well, for sure. So how did this begin? I mean, how did you, I don't know, we just usually just have babies. So what happened? I guess I'm asking what happened.
Well, I talk a lot about in the book about planning. If you ask anyone that knows me, I'm a huge planner. And when things don't go as planned, I don't like it. And so, of course, I planned like, okay, around this time, maybe we'll get pregnant. We'll have a baby around this time of the year. So as soon as we got married, Adam was just totally on board, ready to have kids. And I said, well, I'd really like for us to be, just us for a year. Let's learn to live together. Let's travel, let's do all the things. And then we'll start trying for a baby. So about a year after we were married, that's when we really decided, okay, we really want to have a baby now. And so, of course, I thought within, a few months, I'll be pregnant. And that definitely did not happen. So that's when, started figuring out that, okay, this is not as easy as we thought it was going to be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was telling Jensen before we started the program that when I was young, because I'm old now, not that old, but it's been a while. When I started having babies, it was just, you just, no big deal, or else you didn't. But
Huh?
all of the things that doctors, medicine can do nowadays is amazing, that are, I hate to say manipulation. I don't know that it's that specifically, but um,
Yeah, it is.
to help women who are having trouble having a child, conceiving, that can help you with that. It's just amazing to me reading your book and seeing all the things. And that must have been so difficult on a day-to-day basis.
It was. I think by the time we had Silas, we were married for almost 4 years. And, those 4 years, the saying forged in fire. Yeah, our marriage was
Well,
forged in fire. And I think it's really a good thing. Of course, we didn't think of it as a good thing at the time, but we have such a strong relationship. I don't think anything could ever tear us apart. And that's not us, that's God, because we refuse to let the devil win in that situation, because so many times I think he does. And it's not easy to always, keep God in the center whenever you're right in the middle of the storm, but it took a lot of effort. It took a lot of prayer.
one of the things you wrote about in a chapter you called ugly grief.
Mm-hmm.
And you made the comment about that it's so easy to take your sorrow, your grieving, out on someone else.
Yes.
And the one who's convenient, of course, is your husband.
Yes.
And I was looking at Ephesians 4, and verse 28 came to my mind. Be angry, but don't sin.
Mm-hmm.
God doesn't, object to our being, excuse me, to be angry, but we must be careful not to sin.
Right.
You'll have to talk a moment while I get some water.
That's fine. Yeah. And that's in two different aspects of be angry and do not sin. I think the most important one is do not sin against God, but also don't sin against your spouse and all of those around you. And that's a lot easier said than done. One of the first things that we all want to do is blame God, question God, why has this happened to me, or why is this not happening to me? But you just can't, that can't be your first line of defense. Your faith has to be your first line of defense. And then you just have to ask for forgiveness a lot, especially with your spouse, which, I feel like, I have the best. So
Yeah.
he's very forgiving, and you'll read about that in the book if you read it. We never, had any major blow-ups, but it's just easy whenever that your grief is just gnawing at you, that, and especially for me, because I'm the type of person that I don't just open up and I bottle it up. And so at some point it's going to spill over, and the person that I'm closest to is probably going to get it. And that's always going to be him.
I liked the way in the book that you talked about how you told him up front, this is probably going to happen, and sort of like apologizing in advance, which I would think it would help you to, having voiced that when the feelings came, you were able to stop and
Yes.
sort of,
And it took me a while to get to that point to realize okay, this is a recurrent thing, every month when I see that negative, or something bad happens, it's like I would be okay at first, like, okay, I'm disappointed, but it's okay. And then about a week later, just really hit me all at once. And then I would, he would just do something that was no reason for me to be mad, and then I'd be mad. But so me admitting that and telling him too that, I'm going to need your grace, it really helped.
Yeah. And I sort of, we make connections with things that we read with ourselves, and my connection to it was not of the baby thing, but at my age, that I feel, I hurt and I get sick, and I quite often, because I'm upset with my situation, I'm grieving the loss of, ability or something, that I can see how that's a good lesson for us at any age to be careful of, to not misplace that grief and be angry at someone who's not responsible at all because of our grief. I just thought that was a wonderful principle of behavior for us to think about.
Yeah.
An awareness of the things that are going on in our head. And as you mentioned several times through the book, of how the devil tempts us and tries to get us to sin against others. Mm-hmm.
He sees that little seed that, hey, she's vulnerable right now, so I'm going to swoop in.
Right. Very well said. It was very good too. One of the things you wrote about was the husband's burden through this. I think we often think of a woman as barren, a woman is having trouble, but it's a couple that are. Right. But you're doing something about it. You're trying this and taking this medicine and doing this, and I thought that was very perceptive that he has the burden also.
Yes. I think, especially as a man, I'm sure most men are like this. I know for sure my husband is. When I have a problem, he wants to fix it. Mm-hmm. When I'm sad, he wants to make me feel better. And in this situation, there's just nothing he can do to just fix it. And so that's extremely hard on him. And not to mention that he wanted a baby just as much as I did. So while I'm the one going through all the physical things and, emotional and everything, he went through it too. And he was going through it emotionally, and then having to watch me suffer through it is just as hard on him too.
And the Bible talks about husbands loving your wives and wives loving your husbands. And those are times during hard times such as this, you really have to work on loving one another and caring for one another, not only physically, but also emotionally, caring for that. I thought that was really good. I loved how the passage chapter rather on God winks, that I thought that was neat. I hear that a lot among people that I know in the community where I live. And I thought, oh, that's neat. I mean, another connection for me, I think, was the older I get, the more I see, oh, there's, God's paying. I mean, of course, we know he's paying attention. That sounds awful to say, oh, look, God, but we already know that. But it's just that double message, I guess, to us. We already know it, but here's a kind of an example of it.
You just see something that's, okay, there's absolutely no explanation other than that was God. Mm-hmm. That was God, pretty much showing something for me. I needed to see that. I needed to hear that.
Yeah, that was really good. I really liked that. And how you wrote about your one of the parts about not being mad with God. That's so what Satan does. I mean, that's so what he does.
Yes, in so many situations in life. I mean, that's our first thing that we do, and I wish it wasn't, but I mean, I can't even tell you how many times I just said, why, God? Why me? There's so many people out here just having kids left and right. They don't love them. They don't take care of them. And here we are, a happy couple just ready to give all the love in the world to a baby. Yes. But so much of that was, me just trying to do everything in my power to get what I want instead of fully relying on him.
Yeah. And that's hard, no matter what age, no matter what circumstance. We want to put in our order to God, and you do it this way, instead of.
I'm going to pray to you, God, but I'm also going to tell you how I want it to be answered. So that's not how it works, but that's how we try.
That's exactly right. I was also impressed through the book on how you talk about your prayer life was really strengthened in this, and some of the different methods of prayer, for lack of a better thought, writing prayers down. I thought that was wonderful. How does that enhance your prayer life?
So one of the biggest things for me, and you'll read about this in the book too, is at some point I just stopped and it just hit me like a ton of bricks. Like, oh, wow, there has been so many answered prayers, and I'm just now realizing it. And I had those written down. I went back and looked, and I was just struck. I just had tears rolling down my face, like, wow, that one, they're all answered. And so having it written down, and the biggest thing that started that was a ladies' Bible study at our church, and we did a whole study on prayer, and we all opened up to each other, and every week we still do it. We do it once a month, and at the end of the study, we write down on a sheet of paper, if you want to, of course, a prayer request, and then everyone draws one from the bucket. So for a month straight, at least, you're praying for that one person and whatever they wrote down. Mm-hmm. So by the time I had wrote the book, I think most, if not all, of the requests that I had got for specific things, like, for example, someone was looking for, a mate, and she had a boyfriend, so it's wild.
Yeah. And one of the things that has come home to me, I think, in the last, year, I think, is that the idea and the concept that God is working ahead of us,
yes,
not behind us. The thing that happens, I remember as a child think, well, I need to tell God about this because, like, he doesn't know.
Uh-huh.
But he's ahead of us always. He knows what's going on.
He can see the entire book, where we can see, one sentence, maybe one page at the most.
Yeah.
And that's something that was hard for me to accept, but I can definitely see it looking back is, I saw one page, but he's writing the whole entire story. So
on page 30, you talk about what not to say to someone going through a similar circumstance.
Yeah.
Excuse me. Can you talk some about that?
Yeah. I think, just going through this situation, infertility and loss, there's just so many emotions, and people want to say something. They want to say something helpful, but sometimes it doesn't come across as helpful, and I feel like I do have thick skin. I don't remember many specific times of getting my feelings hurt, but I talk about some friends that I have. I talk about them in the book, and they told me several times, people will say stuff and it would just cut them to the core. It just hurt. And one of the biggest things that, and I wrote this in the book, is you should never start a sentence with "at least," at least whatever. At least you still have, the option to adopt. And I talk about adoption in the book too. I'm very passionate about adoption. I think it's wonderful, but I don't think you should start a sentence when someone's, grieving and going through a hard time. You shouldn't start a sentence with "at least," because that's kind of undermining their situation, and you're telling them, what you're going through. Like, just be thankful for what you have, and we absolutely should, especially as Christians. But you also have to be sensitive to the situation.
Mm-hmm. And the things that you write there, while they were specific of this situation, they fit in so many others. At least, at least it's this kind of cancer, not that, at least, so yeah, that's a great point. Just, those kind of tips, I think, really help us. Like you say, people want to say that magic thing that'll make things good. And
and I think I think I wrote this too. Probably the best thing you can just do is say, "I'm sorry that you're going through this, and I'm praying for you." Mm-hmm. Because there's nothing that you're going to say that's going to fix it, but you can pray for them, and that's the most that you can do. It's the best thing you can do.
That's the very best thing. That's exactly right. On and you'll have your book there, maybe, where you can look at the copy you gave me. You talk about 3 things that are good for all trials. I think it's page 34. I was trying to find it on mine. And of course, mine doesn't want to behave. Nothing is behaving like it's supposed to. But you talk about some things that are good, and one of them was helping one another. And in trials, it's good that we have brothers and sisters in Christ, besides our own blood family, as I always call it, that to help us, and which reminded me in Ecclesiastes 4 in verse 10, that it's a blessing to have someone to help you that we help one another. One by themselves struggles, but when you've got someone to lift you up, that's pretty paraphrasing there, but reminded me of that. One of the things you wrote.
Yeah, that reminds me of something too. I was trying to make sure I get the exact verse to not mess it up. I think it's Hebrews 4. I think it's Hebrews 4:15. Oh yeah, for we do not have a high priest who cannot sympathize with our weaknesses, but was in all points tempted as we are, yet without sin. There's nothing that we're going to go through that Jesus can't sympathize with us. And I think that's one thing that we need to keep in our minds all the time, of that's why we should go to him first, because he can sympathize with us in all ways.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. A little bit later on in the book, you asked the question, or you said, I just don't know how people get through trials without God.
Yeah.
And that again made a connection for me, because I think, how do people in my situation, where I am, it's an older community, and it's like, how do people grow old and face death without God, without knowing and believing and having a confidence in life hereafter? And I think that would be so hard in the situation of infertility without knowing that God is lifting you up and taking care of you. That
Right.
would be so hard.
Yeah. And even, the thought that just really got me the most the whole entire time was, what if I can never have a baby? I just can't even imagine.
Mhm.
But because I'm a Christian, because I'm a child of God, and I have that hope, I know that something better is coming. This world is not my home, and if I don't get what I want, it's okay, because I'm gonna have the best gift of all in heaven, with eternal life with God. And people who don't have that, I mean, what is their hope?
That's exactly right. And I mean, we just depend on God. We look to Him. And as you say, we know that there's a better life waiting for us, whether we have infertility and don't have any birth children of our own, whether we have a dread disease that incapacitates and kills us, or whether we simply deteriorate day after day as we age. God is there, and it's not. I always want to ask. Sometimes in jest, I'll say, "Well, what's the worst that could happen? We die and go to heaven?" I mean,
Exactly.
it's right. So God's with us, and it's such a blessing to know that He's our Father and that He is watching over us day by day.
Mhm.
And you write in your book about the sacred selections, adoptions. Can you tell us some more about that?
Yeah. That's an organization that Adam and I we're passionate about. We know people who have adopted through that. So I'll just give you a very short gist of it. A organization run by wonderful people, and they're not an adoption agency, but they kind of provide kind of like scholarships, I guess, to Christian couples who want to adopt, and they just facilitate so many good things. And they have dinners and raise money to help those. And we've been to a few of those. And every time they have one in our area, I try to invite all of my friends, because I want everyone to experience this, because it will change your life. The first time Adam and I went, we waited until we got in the car, and then we both just lost it. We just cried half the way home, because you just hear these stories, and it changes your life forever. And it makes you view adoption in a way that you may not have before. And that's God's work.
Yes. Yeah. I like the way that it's, I know Dana Carosa, and I can't remember her husband's name, are the founders of it, she and her husband. And it's just beautiful when you listen to her talk about sacred selections and the good that they've done, the children that they've placed in Christian homes. And it's just absolutely marvelous. But you all decided not to adopt, or
Not yet, anyway.
Yeah.
It's definitely still on our hearts and minds. But it hasn't happened yet. So maybe in the future.
Yeah. Yeah. So, in another later chapter, you talk about, and you really very specific, which I really like, about being very careful and beware of Satan in all of this, because, and as reading through your book and thinking of it, I can really see how this is a great opportunity for Satan to tear up your marriage, to tear up your, even your, your friendships, your relationships with others, your family or your husband's family. And it just was so much reminded me of 2 Corinthians 2 and verse 11 that tells us to be aware of and careful about Satan, because we're not ignorant of his devices.
Right.
That we know what he's doing and how he does it. So, that sometimes just knowing and actually using that knowledge wisely is difficult, two different things. So
Yes.
what were some of the ways that you saw Satan working or trying to work?
I think one of the biggest things was, and I've mentioned this already, but was me constantly thinking about what if, what if this is the one thing that I desire right now more than anything, and what if it never happens? Like, I can't imagine that, and that was Satan all along. And then once you get pregnant, I did have 2 miscarriages. So all throughout my pregnancy with Silas, the devil was just constantly in my ear of, something can go wrong. You may lose him at any point. And I just had to constantly remind myself to ground myself in my faith and pray and not let the devil, resist the devil and he will flee from you.
That's right. Really good point. Another thing that I can only imagine how difficult it must be was having joy for others around you. I think your sister got pregnant during the time you were struggling with this, and your friends, maybe, is that, am I remembering it right?
Yes.
And how hard it is to have that joy for others. But it reminded me in 1 Corinthians 12 and verse 26 that when one member rejoices, we all rejoice. When one is sad, we're all sad. And you wrote in the book about how others were sad with you, and but that then everyone, of course, rejoiced with you.
Yes.
When you became pregnant. But I loved how you were able to have that happy sad, which sometimes it's happy sad, it's just both with your sister. And I just thought that was beautiful.
Yeah, and that's one of those things that I don't think you can fully understand it unless you've been through it. Some people think that's horrible, how could you be sad? But it's one of those things. I was so happy for my sister. I knew I love that little boy so much. I get choked up just thinking about it, but
yeah, I see that.
But I mean, I was so happy for her, but then the reality sets in of, my situation, and she felt the same way. She was so happy for herself, but she was sad for me.
Yeah.
But that's one of those things that we have to trust in God's timing, because my little boy and her little boy are about 3 months apart, and they are just bestest friends. And then I have another nephew who was born about 4 months after Silas, and all 3 of them, they're just the bestest of friends. And it's just the best thing to be able to raise my children alongside my brother and my sister.
Sure, absolutely. And as you say, God's timing, several times through, you talk about God's timing. It's not our timing. It's, we think things ought to be a certain way, but God knows best what's best for us. And that's beautiful. Another scripture that reminded me of was in Romans 12:15, where we rejoice with those who rejoice and weep with those who weep. And that's, again, so much that I see in that book that's just beautiful. Another phrase that you wrote, when you talk about after you were pregnant with Silas and how happy you were and all, and you wrote, we haven't forgotten the darkness that God brought us through. even and that is such a temptation, I think, that and I've known people to pray and pray and pray for something, and then when it comes to them, it happens, they're like, well, that was plenty, and they're not mad with God. And so I
Yeah.
just, that was just beautiful that you recognize that God was with you then and he's with you now. It's not like he had forsaken you before.
Right. Yeah. And remembering all of that helps me to help other people, and to be sensitive to other people's situation, because I remember those feelings. I mean, just this week, I heard of someone having a miscarriage, and that feeling, just my heart drops into my stomach every time I hear that, because I go back to that, and I feel that so vividly, and I just feel for that person so much, because I know what they're feeling, and I don't ever want to lose that empathy.
Right. And that's really good, because it is so easy to say, well, I'm just not going to think about that anymore. That's all over. But yet it just in the writing of this book, plus your personal connections with people, you can help women, and you and Adam can help other couples so much by acknowledging the darkness you've walked through. And I don't know if you were thinking about that scripture, Job chapter 29, verses 2 and 3. If only I could be as in months gone by, in the days when God watched over me, when his lamp shone above my head and walked through darkness by his light. I don't know if that was a scripture you were referring to or not, but that's one that came to me to think about, walking through darkness by the light of God. So
Yeah, I think about walking through it, and then when I really think about it, I'm like, I didn't really walk through it. God carried me through it. There's no way I could walk through that myself.
Absolutely. Beautiful. Well said. You talk about praying for others, and the answers that where God gave you the desires of your heart. I love that passage also. That one is a connection for me, that God always answers us. Sometimes it's no, sometimes it's yes, but where God has given us what we've asked for is just such a blessing, and it just really helps us to feel God's care, because it's the way we wanted it to be. But
Right.
again, I like how you felt God's care, even though it wasn't what you had in mind, but you knew God was caring for you. And that's a beautiful faith. Absolutely. Excuse me, I don't know this tickle in my throat. It only happens when I get started.
Of course.
So, excuse me, I beg your pardon. So tell us about how we might buy the book, because as I was reading it, I thought, oh, I need to get this for some people.
So Truth Publications is my publisher. And so the CEI bookstore in Athens, Alabama, they're going to have the book. By the time you're watching this, they will have the book for sure. You can look them up on Facebook, CEI Bookstore. They have a website, and then it will also be available at the Florida College store, Spirit Building, and One Stone, I believe. So all of those should have it. And of course, you can probably just Google "Hope for a Houseful" and my name, and it will come up, because I've already tested that out.
Oh, good. Okay. Very good. Well, I hope that when we do air this program, probably next month from now, that you'll be able, where you can put in the comments this information again, so that we can
yes,
we'll be able to get it. That will be perfect. Well, thank you again so much for being with us, Jensen, and I just appreciate your bringing this message to us. I think this book is going to be really helpful for a lot of women. And
I hope so.
I think it's going to be great. And so we just appreciate all of our viewers tuning in and watching the program and listening to the program, those that do on the different podcasts. So thank you again so much. And Jensen, good night.
Thank you.